All right. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Can you believe it? I had to restart my computer. I haven't had to restart my computer since 1996. Welcome to the live stream. Uh, you can ask me anything here. We've already had a lot of great questions submitted about self-publishing, productivity, creativity, marketing, more. And at this point, I'm not taking questions through the Google form that many of you have submitted through. So if you are watching live and you have questions, just type them into the chat. I'll try to get to them. I already have a lot of great questions submitted through the Google form. And to chat, you're going to need to be subscribed to the channel, you might notice. There's going to be a little bit of a delay, so subscribe to the channel right now. There's not some sort of ploy to, get YouTube subscribers or something. I just am trying to keep the chat safe. I've gone with a longer delay in this chat this time around than the previous AMA. Hopes to get a little bit better video quality. And you can probably see this sty that I have. I'm not on drugs. I just have a sty. And it might take a little while before I can actually see your chats, maybe 30 seconds or so. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And I will go ahead and start answering questions. And just say hello if you're in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me and that you're there. So the first question is kind of a combination of a few questions. One person asked, you recently published 100-word writing habit, non-standard size, fulfilled elsewhere, and wrote about it a bit. I'd love to know more. Can you speak about this process in more detail, the step-by-step? That would be great. And thanks for all you do, David. I have to read that. And that's similar to another question, which is I'd love to know about the process of producing and fulfilling the delivery of a book outside the Amazon KDP universe, so as not to be dependent on this avenue of production and fulfillment, and to have more options in terms of book size, which ties into another question, which is what is the best platform for publishing books? Well, the best platform for publishing books, short answer, is Amazon, especially Kindle, if you have words, if your book isn't predominantly illustration or something like that. But 100-word writing habit is a bit of an experiment for me. Actually, maybe I can grab the book. Here is 100-word writing habit. This was a little bit of an experiment for me, non-standard size, as the person said, and I just wanted to create like a cute little book that would be good to share on Instagram and take pictures of quotes and things like that. Just to do another short read. And I wanted to experiment with a few things. One, the non-standard size. Two, I wanted to experiment with working with a designer and shopping out the design, because I've done my own design for all of my books, and it is quite time consuming. And there's probably people who can, by this point, do a better job than I can, kind of doing it as an extra thing. And what else? I wanted to try just doing something that was exclusively paperback. So the non-standard size is a new feature of Ingram Spark. And what most people do, or most self-published authors do these days, is we will publish on Kindle, and we will publish through KDP Print. And with KDP Print, Amazon prints and fulfills those books and sends them directly to your customers. But you're limited on trim size options with the Amazon KDP Print. It does work very quickly. It's going to be prime shipping for all of your books, because they will print and fulfill all that, and that's nice. But you can't have a custom trim size like you can on Ingram Spark. Additionally, even if you choose extended distribution in Amazon KDP, that's still going to be limited. Most bookstores around the world are not going to order your book. And I've heard mixed reasons why, one of them being that they just don't want to support Amazon. But what most people do then, most self-published authors do, is they sell the book through KDP Print, and then they unclick the extended distribution. They deselect extended distribution, and then they go on to Ingram Spark, and they uh, publish there, and that publishes the book uh, to where it's pretty much available about worldwide. Somebody can walk into your bookstore or store in rural England and ask the bookstore to order your book, and they should be able to do that. There's a little bit slightly different specs, different paper options and stuff on Ingram Spark, but that's generally the best way to do it. And often what people will do is I'll buy my ISBN previously through Blocker, and then I will set up the book, the basic parameters on Ingram Spark, put in the ISBN number, and then uh, that supposedly sort of makes it show up in the database as not an Amazon book. And then I go publish on Amazon, put my ISBN in there. Some of that may have changed. You might not even need an ISBN, but that's what I do. Now, Ingram Spark, they have this new custom trim size option. And so I wanted to try that out and see if I could just make like a little square book. And so that's what I did. And I hired a designer off Reedsy, Reedsy, and worked with that designer. It was a really easy process. And this was pretty easy through Reedsy to actually hire a designer and have them work on this book. It was a little bit back and forth, cost a couple $1,000s or so. And anyway, so this book then is only fulfilled by Ingram Spark through Amazon, that is, because Ingram Spark's data feed goes into Amazon. And if Amazon already has that book, then they just don't publish the Ingram Spark one. But if they don't, then they publish the one that's coming from Ingram Spark. Now, anybody who was following along found that I had a lot of difficulties with keeping the book in stock on Amazon, or even getting the book in stock. I think I have a couple theories about that. So one is that the whatever terms that you have for your book set up in Ingram Spark, your wholesale terms are going to determine whether or not, are going to not determine, but influence whether or not your book will actually be in stock by Amazon. There's going to be other factors like how much traffic is the page getting, if there's a Kindle edition, how many sales are happening there. Amazon doesn't want to bother ordering the book, keeping it in stock unless they are confident that there's going to be some sales. So a couple things there was that one, I at first had a return policy that was, I think I had no returns on it. And then I also had the wholesale discount at the minimum, which is 30%, which is what I usually do, because normally if somebody walks into their local bookstore and orders my book, they're ordering it directly. The bookstore is probably not going to stock my book. So I go ahead and give the minimum discount to booksellers. Otherwise, the maximum is 55%. And that would pretty much guarantee that Amazon's going to, well, maybe not guarantee, but it will increase the odds that Amazon's going to stock your book. So for a few weeks, Amazon was saying, oh, this book ships in 1,000 years. So obviously you don't want to order it, is basically what it said. And then there were some third-party sellers who must have algorithms or something that maybe ordered the book or weren't even ordering the book or keeping it in stock, but had listed it at a marked up price. And that was a problem. But when I changed my wholesale terms to allow returns, and I changed it from 30% to 35%, which may have not been necessary, then Amazon started to keep it in stock. It didn't happen overnight. It took a couple of weeks. And then, of course, sending traffic from existing readers that helped keep it in stock. So it was an experiment. And that's why it's great to do these things with like a short read, rather than taking some book that you've spent years on and experimenting and finding out for the first time how something like that works. If you say want to have a custom trim size like Ingram Spark allows. Um, as far as other ways of fulfilling it, I also have uploaded this to Book Vault, and they are based in the UK. And I just hook up PayHip to Book Vault through Zapier, and you can also use Shopify. But I already have a PayHip store, so I figured I would just experiment with it. Now, setting up the shipping terms is a little complicated, so I just kind of said free shipping, and I'm shipping to these countries and not others to just start off and not make things too complicated and also not lose money when I'm shipping to Indonesia or something like that. Uh, and so uh, the Book Vault experiment I was a little disappointed with it because it did take 2 or 3 weeks. You can get books to show up faster, but then it costs a lot more, and then you're not making a profit anymore. But when the Book Vault books showed up, I'm holding up my Amazon and the Book Vault one, and the Book Vault one's shiny, and the Amazon one's matte. It's maybe hard to tell from the video, certainly hard to tell if you're only listening through audio, but the Book Vault's printing quality is insanely good. It is very good. So I was very happy with that. And Book Vault, when I ordered my copy of 100 Word Writing Habit, was only printing and shipping from the UK. And they are, I don't know if they've already set it up, but they're maybe they have already set it up. They're setting up in it's set up in the US now. I haven't yet ordered from the US, so I don't know how that's changed shipping. So I'm just sort of dipping my toes also in fulfilling my own books. Maybe someday I'll have a Shopify store and I'm fulfilling a lot of my own books. I'm not going hard on that, but like with many things, I like to just start with some kind of little experiment, the sort of the minimum viable thing that I have to do to try out this thing. And that's getting me more comfortable with it. And I have some peace of mind there knowing that, if something happens to Amazon or my sales on Amazon, then I have some options or have some experience selling books directly to readers. And if you do want to order the Book Vault version of 100 Word Writing Habit, you can get that at the PayHip, on my PayHip store, which is payhip.com/KDV. So yeah, I think that's everything regarding shipping outside of Amazon. Oh, I did also look into using Amazon FBA, and the way that would work would be that I would ship books to Amazon to their warehouse, and then they would fulfill the books for me and would have the nice Prime logo on there and everything. And I looked into what would that cost for me to print from Book Vault, say 500 books, and send them to Amazon. And they've got a little calculator where you can see, what are the storage costs, because they charge you for storing the books, what are the sort of shipping and handling costs. And the economics were not good. Instead of making like $3.79 a book or something, it was maybe $1.39 or somewhere around there. So it's, when you look at that, when you really look at the options, it's actually quite impressive how cheaply Amazon is able to print your books and get them to people, so long as you sort of go by whatever their standard restrictions are. Okay, so that was a pretty long answer. I've got a question in the chat from Jorge. Any plans for a second edition of Design for Hackers? Would be really nice. Yeah, no plans for it. I just keep moving on to the next thing and the next thing. I don't want to be revisiting. I just have too many other plans for other stuff. It would be great to do a second edition. I'm sure there's a lot of things that could be updated. I've considered it, like maybe even, if somebody served as sort of the editor of the second edition to sort of spearhead what sort of new things are need to be considered in that book. But I did talk to Wiley about it at one time, and I didn't really like the terms of the second edition relative to all the other things that I want to make. I just feel like it would be a lot of work for a very marginal improvement on a topic that doesn't interest me anymore. I'm just sort of, I just keep going on to the next thing. I don't want to keep banging the design drum. So another question I had, can you comment on Buenos Aires and Medellin for a mind management point of view? This is from uh, Ian, who I know, and hi, Ian, blast from the past. It's been a long time since I talked to Ian. Didn't know that you were reading my stuff. Uh, difference between Buenos Aires and Medellin from a mind management point of view. So I did a couple months in Buenos Aires in 2012. That was kind of my one of my first mini lives. Buenos Aires can be tough given late nights. People warned me before I went to Buenos Aires that, oh, you'll be staying out till 6 in the morning, etc. And I thought, well, no, I probably won't. That's not really my style. I'm not really a big party person, but there's just something about the energy of that city that is, it's a little bit like I would imagine a manic episode is. I mean, there's just, it's just, it's kind of hard to focus. It's a little crazy. If you can't, if you go to dinner somewhere at like 8 p.m., you're going to be the only person there. People aren't having dinner until like midnight, and there's children running around, at that hour and everything. So there's just something about the city that it stays up late. They party a lot. Medellin has a party scene, but it's not interesting to me. Um, Buenos Aires it was a little bit more, has more of an adventurous sense, and it's a little bit it's just more chaotic than Medellin. Medellin can be really steady. People go to bed early, people uh, wake up early. There's no change of season, so the sun sets and rises at the same time. I think Buenos Aires can be good for like big C creativity. Like if you want to sort of bust your brain wide open and see and disrupt yourself and see what new ideas come. I mean, coming to Medellin can do that too, but Medellin is better for routine. You can really get into a groove there. Um, I will say though that one thing I really loved about Buenos Aires was that I could take tango lessons in the middle of the day. So at that time, I was working on the talk that I did at South by Southwest in 2012. And so my routine was that I would wake up and work on the talk. And then midday, right after lunch, I would go to tango class, which was great because when I took tango lessons in Chicago, it kind of sucked. You could only take lessons in the evening, and everybody's really grumpy because they just got off work. And there's milongas what you can go dance at, but there's really just a couple during the week. And tango is such that, especially as a lead, if you aren't really good, it's very high pressure to be in a milonga. Uh, Buenos Aires is such that there are many places where there are milongas, but there's a really just sort of one place each night of the week where sort of everybody goes. But if you're a beginner, you can go to one of the other ones and it'll be less pressure. So I never really did get the hang of tango. I'm more of a bachata person, but I still, that is still maybe one of my white whales, to go down to Buenos Aires and actually get the hang of tango. Even though I took many, many tango lessons, it's a very hard dance. Uh, Next, how can you pick a creative project when you have too many ideas? Okay, so this is a question that I get very often, and something that I've struggled with myself. The statement here is essentially that I have too many ideas and I must pick one. Too many ideas, must pick one. So there's three assumptions wrapped up in this statement. Now, one of these is that all these ideas are equally likely to succeed. The second assumption is I'm equally capable of succeeding at each of these ideas. And then the third is that I can really only pursue one idea at once. So those are the basic assumptions, because if 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 one idea were more likely to succeed than the others, then you wouldn't feel like you had too many ideas, must pick one. If you felt like you were more capable of one than the others, then you wouldn't feel like you had too many ideas, must pick one. And then there's the assumption that you really must pick one. Now, to examine these assumptions, I'm actually working on a Love Your Work episode all about this. There's some questions that you can ask. What is success is one question, because success can come in many different forms. One idea might bring freedom. Another idea might bring money. What is my risk profile? Maybe two things from an expected value point of view are equally likely to succeed, but it's that one is highly likely to bring you mild success and another is very unlikely to bring you wild success. And you have to ask yourself, which are you more comfortable with? Which can you risk? What's your TOM, which is what I call time optionality and money? What's your TOM profile? If you're young and you've got maybe you have a lot of optionality, but you don't have a lot of money, and therefore because you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of time. Maybe you can try a crazy idea so long as it doesn't take a lot of time or money. Or maybe you're in your 60s and you had a really successful career and you're retired and you got a lot of money and you got a lot of time day to day, but you don't have a lot of optionality. There's not a lot of projects that you can do in your life, but you might also feel like, well, I don't have anything to lose, so let's just try something really wild. So you want to ask, what is my risk profile? What's your risk appetite? And what am I good at? And that might not always be clear. Maybe you maybe you don't feel like you're good at something in particular, and this is where you have to really be thinking back to times when maybe you did something and it seemed like nothing, but somebody else was really impressed by it. Or you can actually ask your friends what they think that you're good at. And then what's necessary to succeed at this idea. And that can be, there can be some sneaky things there, because the things that attract us to ideas are not necessarily, are definitely not so much of the things that your day to day usually involves. It's like maybe you love to play music, in front of an audience, but do you like driving around the country and sleeping in a van and setting up gear and dealing with curmudgeonly AV techs at every venue? Or maybe you love the idea of signing books at the local Barnes and Noble, but do you love the idea of sitting by yourself in a room and suffering your way through writing books day to day, day by day for years on end? Which brings us to another question you would ask, which is what pain do I pick? Or what am I willing to suffer through? Because there's always going to be something that you don't enjoy, or especially at first, about an idea. So, like, to think about myself, I probably had the most talent when I was younger at drawing. I loved to draw. Now, I wasn't keen on the risk profile of making a living drawing, and a lot of the things that I think that would necessitate didn't really fit the lifestyle that I wanted, or what I determined to be success. I don't want to lug around art supplies all over the world. And also, even if I were to do all my work on a computer, I wouldn't want to be chained to a computer all day. I could type on a typewriter much of the day as a writer. So I found out that I was decently good at writing, and so that's what I started doing. And it was painful, especially at first, and it's still a little painful, but it's kind of like it's like a discomfort that I enjoy, and I don't mind sitting in a room by myself for years on end and thinking about stuff. I actually, don't really want to do the book signing at the local Barnes and Noble. Anyway, so uh, that's you have to think about all these things, and that's how you can start to examine these assumptions about whether these ideas are equally likely to succeed. If you have a better definition of success, then that won't make so much sense anymore. That if you're equally capable of implementing these ideas, and then you might actually feel like you don't actually have enough information to answer a lot of these questions. In which case, this whole idea that you can't pursue more than one idea at once uh, doesn't make a lot of sense, because um, if you don't have a lot of information, then you need to try a lot of things and get some information. So don't fall for the fortress fallacy. Don't focus on trying to build the fortress. Maybe instead try to build a series of cottages and start to collect that information about what do you think success is? What are the actual risk profiles of different ideas? What are you good at that you might not think that you were good at? What sort of not that fun things are involved in succeeding at something that you would think that you would like to succeed at? And if they're not that much fun, which are the ones that you're willing to tolerate? So those are my thoughts on that. Um, what has surprised you the most about X in the past year or two? What interests me is your answer and your choice of X. I'll have to say, first, my biggest surprise is that Kathy Sierra is asking me questions on my AMA. Now, for those of you who don't know who Kathy Sierra is, she's the co-creator of the Head First series of books. She's got a Wikipedia page. She's a pretty big deal. So it's an honor to get questions from Kathy Sierra. I remember seeing Kathy Sierra speak in like 2006 and 2007, South by Southwest. So it's always exciting to see who's on my list, who's asking me questions. So that's fun. But to answer the question probably more seriously, I'd say that living in the country has been a surprise for me. I have moved out of Medellin. I live in a cabin in the mountains outside of Medellin now. And that was a big adjustment for me in a number of ways. First, I had to get a car, and I hadn't had a car in 15 years. I still love that, but it's nice to have that mobility and freedom. And it's also, yeah, I don't see people that often. I live next door to one of my friends, which is good, but it's been an interesting challenge to sort of disconnect myself from sort of the distractions that exist in a big city like Medellin, and to really sort of lean into a little bit of solitude and writing and spending more time with my thoughts and doing more reading and upping my video game. For those who are watching video, the video quality is probably a lot better than the previous one. So that's been a surprise. I hadn't, if you had asked me 2 years ago whether I'd have a car and own a house, I bought this house, which is crazy. I'm not certainly not somebody who's a big proponent of buying houses, but it's sort of something that I needed to do to get what I wanted. And I did have the cash. I bought the house for like $130,000. And so now I own a house. So those are surprises. Now a surprise, maybe I have to. I don't want to have a positivity bias. Here's a negative surprise, which is that I've realized that the podcast doesn't have a lot of engagement. I have a lot of downloads in the Libsyn dashboard, but I went and looked at the iTunes or the Podcast Connect thing and realized like, oh, there's actually people aren't not actually, there's a lot of downloads happening, but there's not a ton of listens or engaged listens happening. So that's certainly something that I'm reevaluating and thinking about. Podcasts are, a very competitive and difficult medium to succeed in. There's been a lot of other things taking up people's attention, and when you're doing podcasts, well, now there's so many other players in the game. I'm like competing against Michelle Obama now. Uh, and so it's making me think a little bit about the media landscape and the ways that that I sort of have my open mics and get my ideas out in into the world. And is the podcast the right way to do that? Other surprises, a positive surprise, digital Zettelkasten, which came out about 2 years ago, was a huge surprise and success. I started with a blog post on Zettelkasten, and those of you who listened to my episode on making predictions know that when I made that blog post, I made the prediction that I was 95% certain that if I wrote this article, it would not uh, rank in the top 10 on Google within 3 months, according to Google Console. And it turned out it did. It did rank in the top 10. And it was getting decent traffic. So I spent a few months on a short read, put that out there. And that totally, that was the surprisingly, I had already had mind management, not time management out. But that was the point where, oh, okay, like now I'm making a comfortable living off of my writing. Sales have slowed for digital Zettelkasten. Maybe I should do something to revive them. But that was a surprise and a pleasant one at that. I've also sold foreign rights for it in Polish and Korean, and occasionally get other inquiries. I guess also at large, ChatGPT is a big surprise. I didn't see that coming. It's a little unsettling how much it dominates people's consciousness right now. I think that people are overreacting. I'm not an AI expert. You can find AI experts who think people are overreacting. You can find AI experts who think people are underreacting. I think ChatGPT is overrated as a writer. It's a bad writer's idea of a good writer, is what I think. But I do love it for conversations. It is a very useful tool for me. I find it very helpful for gaining quickly an understanding of very complex topics for which I would otherwise have to read entire books or multiple books. And so it's become a big part of my process. It's my sort of barbell strategy for thinking is to sit down with my typewriter and write on my typewriter for a few hours until I get some questions built up. And then I've got those questions built up, and I grab my phone and I ask some questions on ChatGPT, or I have a conversation about, Renaissance Italian politics, or, what were the different arguments on each side of the Civil War, or things like that. So it's an amazing conversation partner. So that is another thing that has really surprised me over the past couple of years. Chat GPT. So I'm going to answer a question from the chat, which is there a part of your daily practice that would qualify as tedious, which you nonetheless feel willing to persist with? Ooh. So much of what I previously thought of as tedious, I am able to connect with meaning enough that it doesn't feel quite so tedious. So, for example, one thing I found very tedious early on was doing bookkeeping, keeping track of my expenses and my income and all that. And so I shopped that out to a bookkeeper. And then I started doing the income reports. And so now I actually look forward to tallying up my numbers each month. It's certainly more fun when the numbers are going up. But it gives me a picture of my business, and it gives me a way to steer the ship. And so now I don't even really use a bookkeeper except for maybe a couple line items I might struggle with in QuickBooks, because my QuickBooks skills are not that great. But so now I do that, and I don't mind it so much. So I'm just trying to think of, well, probably a good clue of what's tedious are things that I feel like I have to give myself a reward sort of to do. So one way that I get myself to feel motivated to do things that feel tedious is I have nicotine lozenges. I'm not a smoker, never have been. Um, but I've gotten enough information from the research to make the personal choice that if I have a 1 milligram nicotine lozenge every week or couple weeks or few weeks, that's not going to have a terribly detrimental effect on my health. And so um, sometimes when I feel a little bit like a task is going to be tedious, I will take a nicotine lozenge and give myself that treat. And it does help me focus for that short period of time. And I'm fortunately not a somebody who tends to get addicted to things. So even though I've done that for a couple of years now, I still have not increased my frequency of taking nicotine lozenges. Now, what tasks do I typically take the nicotine lozenges for? One would be scheduling love, putting together and scheduling the Love Mondays newsletters. I love writing the Love Mondays newsletters, and it is a lot of fun. But there's just a couple little details to sort of let's get this done that are um, not complex enough for me to delegate, and also because so much of the creative process inherent in making those into good newsletters is integrated with the process of actually producing them. I've done an episode on the podcast and an article on the blog about my newsletter system, how I use Airtable to sort of automate a lot of it. But it is a matter of taking the creative, the article that I've written and putting it in the Airtable spreadsheet and then selecting, aphorisms, books, cool things. And I've created Airtable apps to make that process go really easily. And then I've got to put it in Active Campaign and schedule the email. So it's something that takes me, an hour, 2 hours. Same thing with getting the podcast stuff ready. So, those things that are involve sort of the nuts and bolts of getting my work out there. That's probably the most tedious stuff that I have to do. There's probably a lot of other tedious things that I should be doing, maybe if I wanted to grow my business more, and I guess I kind of do. So maybe I should think about what those things are. But that's a good question. Maybe there should be more tedious things actually. Next question: you talk about your task management system and mind management. What software or app do you use? I use for to dos. I use Todoist. It's a really cool app that you can have tags and contexts, or I guess tags are and you can set up repeatable things, and it's just text based, so you can, or it can be just text based, so you can just type the due date, or every Friday or every third Friday, and it will set that task as repeating. And I might have talked about this in my newsletter system article. I talked about it maybe a little bit in my book, but on an abstract level. So one thing I do is I use Airtable for my schedule for the podcast and for the Love Mondays newsletter. And Airtable is just like, it's like a spreadsheet, but in some ways it's more capable than Google Spreadsheets. In other ways, it's less capable, but it's certainly more attractive and feels good to interact with. And so when I go into my Love Your Work podcast Airtable, and I set the dates of upcoming podcasts, and then I just say May 1 of 2 or June 1 of 3, depending on the number of episodes that will appear in that month. And then I choose the release date, and then I choose the record date, which I set for the second to last Thursday of each month. Is something I do manually. I put that in in Airtable. Well, when that new Airtable cell shows up, that triggers Zapier to then create a whole series of tasks in Todoist. And so they're just always tasks like that in Todoist. I I really just do that for repeatable stuff. And I try to make as many things as possible repeatable creative systems that okay, this is how many cupcakes you're going to make each month and you've got to decide you have some creative leeway on how whether you're going to put sprinkles on it or what the frosting is going to be like. And so I just try to make it as repeatable as possible. So there's as few decisions as possible about, do I feel like writing something? Am I gonna do a newsletter? Things like that. Now for uh, things that are just one-off big projects that are going on, it's really just uh, improvising. Little whiteboard sticky notes, little 9 by 12 whiteboards, things like that. Very not that sophisticated. You don't need much. I think make things as repeatable as you can, get them into some system that you reliably check, and then the rest of the stuff just create and have some sort of habit where I get up every morning and I write, and that's what I do. And then there's certain things that happen on Fridays and there's certain things that happen on Mondays. I've got certain rules about that. Like Mondays are pretty much no devices, writing on the typewriter as much as I can all day, maybe chatting with ChatGPT a little bit. Fridays, lately, I'm asking myself the question, what can I do with what I already have? So I'm going to my website, and I'm combing around and I'm thinking about, well, how can I get more leads coming in? What pages need to be updated? What links need to be built in between various things? How are things ranking on search engines according to what I might expect? So it's really just my main tools are rituals and habits and systems. Uh, so Matt Lacey, I need to get to Matt's question. Would you recommend having a weekly email/newsletter rather than a blog to encourage publishing regularly? Matt, I am a proponent of the newsletter right now. You can own both. You can own the blog and you can own the newsletter, but having a list of people's emails that you can send out when you have some new product is great, and you can own that. You can take it wherever you want, and it's a relatively uh, low overhead thing. the The blog I still like, but I'm thinking more and more about the relevance of my blog. Sometimes I write posts where I feel like there's gonna be some inbound search traffic, like if I write a book summary. But some of the conceptual stuff, I'm thinking more and more about, well, do I even want to be publishing this publicly on the internet for everyone to just get for free? And the reason why has nothing to do with the content of those things. It has everything to do with where's the value flow at. Because it used to be that there were key places where I was pretty sure I could put up some sort of conceptual article, and people who found it, there would be a decent way to get some traffic to it, and people would find it interesting. Medium was like that for a while. Hacker News, I used to be able to get articles at the top of Hacker News relatively regularly, and I just don't even know where those portals are anymore. And I'm sure they exist. There's obviously Hacker News still exists, but the content has changed a lot. And I don't know if people are really going around so much looking for blog posts to discover. They're kind of glued to TikTok or Instagram, and maybe reading a tweet here and there, or buying a book, because I can sell 30,000 books, but getting 30,000 views on a free blog post is really difficult. So, but at the same time, I do recognize that there are people who enjoy reading my conceptual stuff, but I kind of feel like, well, maybe they should be getting that only if they're subscribed via email, or maybe those should be premium articles. If I were starting from zero, I'd probably try Substack. I've got some questions about Substack. Uh, in that, I'll start with those questions. The questions that I have about Substack are: one, the categories. There's not really clear categories for the type of work that I do. It does look like if you're a journalist, it's a good place to be. Second is hype. There's a lot of hype around Substack. As far as I know, they're not profitable. The latest financials that I've seen from them suggest that they're not. They've raised at least $87 million, and they're spending a lot of money on getting writers to go over to Substack who already have high profiles, so that the little people will want to go over to Substack. Now you with Substack, you get the email addresses, so you can take those email addresses wherever you want. But look at what they're doing. They're trying to sort of get their claws around creators and have it be the one-stop shop for your podcast host, your newsletter host, and your quote unquote blog with payment system. And that just makes it harder and harder to migrate off. And that's just all. It depends on how much work somebody wants to put into piecing together things to have freedom. And there certainly is some utility to the idea that if people are already subscribed to Substack newsletters and paying for them and already have their payment information in there, that they can more easily not only discover your content through referral systems that they have in place, but also they can just click a button and start paying to receive whatever your premium content is. Now, if they're not profitable, are they going to be taking more and more of a cut in the future? I think so. So this doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't be on Substack or they shouldn't be on ConvertKit or whatever platform has a lot of hype. But anyway, I do like, though, that Substack does make it easy to set up a sort of premium content option for which you could earn money. And it's a little bit of it's both blog and newsletter. Your content's kind of public, and you can control to what level it's public, whether somebody needs to be subscribed to really read it, or they make it really uncomfortable for you to read it if you're not subscribed via email. So that's a little bit sort of happy medium, best of both worlds situation. What tips do you have for focusing on one project at a time when you have multiple curiosities that need to feed off each other? Kate, who emails me frequently and who I email with frequently, asked this question, so definitely want to get to this. Build systems. So one project at a time when you have multiple curiosities that need to feed off each other. So I think build systems that engage those curiosities in a repeatable way while building toward a larger body of work. So this is what I do currently. My system is write tweets. Those tweets end up in an Airtable database. I curate those tweets, and then I form them into larger pieces of work, such as the Love Mondays newsletters. If those are going well, those will often become podcast episodes. Often works in reverse, where I free write for a little bit and I realize, oh, this would make a really great tweet. Or, maybe this isn't maybe this isn't exactly a podcast episode, but this could be a Love Mondays newsletter. And then that all just kind of builds up into a book, not in a neat manner, in a very messy manner, in that there will be sort of lines of thought that I think are going to go into a book at some point in time. But as it develops, I realize, no, that's actually not the best way for me to say what I'm trying to say. So I think having some kind of deliverables that you do on some kind of schedule and that you get feedback for, while also if you have a lot of curiosities, having sort of areas or buckets of time and energy that you can dedicate towards some of those other curiosities. For myself, on the weekends, I might dabble with something else. Like I took up a little bit of bird photography. I live around a lot of beautiful birds, and I got this camera, and so I got a big lens, and I did some bird stuff. I'm doing some fiction stuff on the side, and these aren't a part of my system, but I try to make space to make little experiments with those things. But I don't jump into them as like, okay, I'm going to be a professional bird photographer, or all right, now I'm going to be, the greatest fiction author in the world. It's a part of the system, and in that it's outside of the repeatable stuff, but there's space for it. And I also think that it's helpful to, instead of asking what you want to make, ask who you want to be. And so, what are the things that you can make that will make you into that person? So when I write a book summary for my blog and put it on my podcast, well, that helps me absorb that book. Previously, when I was doing a lot of interviews, I learned a lot from those people and I connected with those people. Um, I like to do things that even if it fails, I'm still going to be better off, just for the fact, not that the thing that I made exists, but for the fact that I did the work that led to the making of it. Yet, as you do these things, your curiosity's signature, so to speak, just through the universality of a human experience, is just naturally going to resonate with some other people. Some ways that I'm doing some of that is, like, I'm going to Italy soon, and I love like Renaissance Italy and Roman history and art, and I'm going on a research trip, and it's going to be very enjoyable for me, and it's going to turn me into somebody who knows more about those things. But I'm finding a way to build it into the work that I'm already doing. So that's to do some research on a particular chapter, perhaps multiple chapters of the next book. When you start writing on a new topic or subject, how do you keep yourself from falling into the research rabbit hole? Appreciate all your advice and wisdom. I love listening to your podcast, reading your blog posts. Thank you, Brian. When I start, how do I keep from falling in the research rabbit hole? In a way, I don't. But I did have that article / podcast episode about the curiosity management system, which is something that I use. And one way I think about that is when I get curious about something, it goes through a little bit of a mental filter for me. I ask myself, what type of curiosity is this? Is this cursory curiosity? Is it compulsory curiosity? Is it compulsive curiosity? Cursory curiosity is like you're vaguely curious about this thing. You want to know the basics of it. Compulsory is you sort of feel like everybody's talking about this thing. I need to at least know something. And then compulsive that's the type where it just keeps pulling you. And I think that it's helpful to have a system that helps you engage appropriately according to your level of curiosity with the right amount of information. So for me, that is the sort of crumb time list, where if I'm curious about a thing, I first ask myself what level of curiosity there is. I put it on the list so I don't just jump off into that other thing, except for if I have designated some time where I'm sort of allowed to do that, as might be like late Monday mornings or Saturday mornings for me for that. And at the same time, I also try to embrace the idea that if I ship lots of little things, they will that are something on their own, that they will build into something larger, but most of it will go to waste. You're sort of building the iceberg so that you can show the tip of the iceberg. And so one thing to do is to one, scope things so that you can create something shippable uh, without going down too far down the rabbit hole. And that's just a matter of your level of experience and your level of confidence with being able to finish something. So, when I used to write, when I was first starting to really dedicate myself to writing blog posts, I wanted to get up in the morning, write and draft and ship a blog post in like an hour and a half. Um, I've gotten confident enough with my shipping and with my process of learning about things and writing about it that now I can like go all the way to Italy and go on a research trip and not feel like that sort of anxiety that, oh my gosh, am I procrastinating? Am I going down a rabbit hole where I'm not going to find something useful? It's a matter of managing that. And let me grab something. This is a tensegrity toy. I don't know if this will make sense. I'm taking a risk here. This is a tensegrity toy. So it's a type of structure that is compression, which is these sticks, and then tension, which is these elastic bands. And I love this toy because this, for me, represents like what a completed creative project is that you have requirements, like it's going to be a 500 word blog post or it's going to be a 250 page book. And that's like the compression elements of it, the sticks. But then you have, I don't know, like all the different, this flexibility to it, all the different elements that are going to attach to one another to make it into a cohesive thing. And that can kind of end up being a little bit like you just sort of know when you get there. Because if I cut one of these elastic bands, the whole thing would fall apart. And that's the way that it feels for me when I reach a point on a creative project where I'm comfortable with shipping it. And so that does involve going down some little bits of rabbit holes, but also within my level of comfort and experience with arriving at this cohesive thing. Anyway, this toy is very cool. This is a type of structure that NASA's even studying as a like a Mars rover because it can land on a planet and then it can roll based on how it changes the tension, and whatever the payload is in the middle won't be damaged. Let's see here. We're getting pretty close to time here. Okay, well, that is gonna be. I'll just take one last one really quick, which is how many half-formed ideas do you have captured somewhere? And that is many, 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 many. I have, my inbox on drafts. I've got my Zettelkasten in Obsidian. I've got pages of stuff that I've written about freely on my typewriter. There's things in my head that maybe I've typed out on my AlphaSmart but then deleted. I'm always collecting, revisiting half-formed ideas until they reach that sort of tensegrity point of becoming something, of gelling, right? Is that when a liquid becomes a gel, I don't really know what goes on molecularly, but I imagine there's some tension like this that happens to be amongst the molecules. So I embrace my cognitive style as a fox, as somebody who has a wide variety of interests, who is not a hedgehog, who is not into one big thing that they just drive towards, and try to work with that the way that you might try to ride a wild horse, or I guess the common metaphor is an elephant. So that is everything for the live stream. Thank you, everyone, so much for submitting your questions and for coming. Oh, and join the Patreon. I am putting new stuff on Patreon. I've got the first uh, chapter of my upcoming book, or at least a draft of it, that I've put up as a sample audiobook. I hope to do that with a future chapter. I've got a new little Patreon only Coffee with Kadavy podcast that there's 4 episodes up. There's about to be 5. And I've included a lot more in just the $5 uh, level on that. So do join the Patreon. Anyway, again, thank you so much. I hope that you all have great days.